Baylor Director of Athletics Mack Rhoades with us last week at Big 12 meetings in Scottsdale, where everybody kind of converged in a lot of ways, college athletics. Paul Catalina, Craig Smoak, and David Smoak. Mack, thank you very much for your time. How much have the stories at Alabama with the coach, and then yesterday or the last couple of days with Iowa and Iowa State and gambling shown up on your radar in educating student athletes?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. In fact, it was our executive team meets every Tuesday morning, and so we spent considerable time talking about it this morning, and just again checking ourselves, making sure that we've done a really good job of educating our student athletes and staff on the whole gambling issue, and we have been for a while now very, very proactive in that space. Chad Jackson and his staff do a great job in that area. So I think as we look back over this past year and years before, we are really consistent in terms of reminding our student athletes and staff on the do's and don'ts. Again, being really transparent. We're going to send something out here in the next 24 hours again as another reminder. The reality is that are you batting 1,000% on your campus, meaning that coaches, staff are not betting on any NCAA championship sponsored sports, and even if it's legal to bet on college athletics within your state, like it is in Iowa, they're one of 33 states. NCAA still prohibits it, and so again, just making sure, and all of us could be under investigation. I think I read somewhere, you all correct me if I'm wrong, that Iowa or Iowa State, one of the two they weren't notified until May 2nd that they'd been under investigation. And so again, just a reminder, and we've been proactive in the space. We'll continue to be. That doesn't mean that we're not vulnerable, and we know that.
One of the, and albeit probably minor protections right now, Mack, because there are, I'm sure, ways around that you'd have to sit in a room forever to figure out any rule, but is that we are currently in a state that does not allow sports gambling. Eventually, that will probably go away whenever that is. So do you have to spend that time trying to stay one step ahead of the game?
Yeah, we do. And, I think it helps, Paul, that, obviously it's not legal in the state of Texas. And I'm not a gambler, but my understanding and part of the conversation, yesterday evening and even today was like, if you've got those apps, online gambling, and apparently I think all of this happened online. So, you're able to, authorities are able to track everything. But if you're online in the state of Texas, you don't have certain options like you would if you were in a state where it's legal. But and we have to be, it has to be top of mind, and it's got to be constant in terms of the reminders. You can't just do it once a year. You have to have it multiple times throughout the year, and again, both with staff and our student athletes.
Mack, does this shoot up the list of issues pretty quickly? Does it reserve a high spot, or does it kind of take its place behind so many other things that have piled up over the last year or two, as far as athletic administration and the problems you guys are dealing with, or issues you guys are dealing with?
Yeah, Craig, I think it's it's one of the more significant items that we need to deal with and address. And you think about just some of what's happened in the past with gambling, illegal gambling, within our industry, whether it's been staff or student athletes. participating in it, and then changing outcome of games. Those are all things that will kill a program pretty quickly, and so those are all things that we worry about and have to be top of mind, and have to be a priority, and so it's very much and has been very much top of mind here at Baylor.
Mike Oresco today came out with a nearly 2,600 word letter, and he has been on the bandwagon, and he, of course, runs the American Conference, and you were a part of that when you were at Houston, so you understand it. But he's very upset about the wording of Power 5 and Group of 5, and he's done this before. You usually use Autonomy 5. When you were at Houston or elsewhere, did you feel like the Group of 5 or Power 5 was insinuating a difference, and was it offensive? And offensive is not the right word, but did it make people mad?
Yeah, that's a really interesting subject and question. I've got great respect for Commissioner Oresco. I was there at the University of Houston. We were Big East, under the Big East name and umbrella for a moment when we hired him, and so I get what I appreciate most about him is that he's fighting for his conference, and and has been, and what I think is a little bit ironic, quite frankly, is forever he labeled them as the Power 6. And so he, in doing that, absolutely advocated for that separation. And again, I have great respect for him. When I was at Houston, probably what it did for us was put a chip on our shoulder, and wanting to prove that we can compete with the best in the country. The reality is that there was this separation. It started out as Autonomy 5. It was based on NCAA legislation, and Autonomy 5 conference could drive certain legislation that was permissive, meaning that you didn't have to do it, but you could certainly do it if it was right for your institution, and Group of 5s could participate. But the reality of where we are is there is a difference, and there is a difference when you think about economics, and you think about revenues into those 5 conferences, primarily from the TV media partners, and those are the schools, those are the conferences that garner most of the eyeballs and drive advertising, and so TV media partners are paying those conferences more money. They have more resources because of it. The CFP is built on that, right? More quality teams. That doesn't mean that there aren't quality teams in those other conferences. We've seen it in the past. We've seen a Boise State. We've seen a UCF. We've seen a Houston. We've seen a Cincinnati play in the CFP. But overall, there is a difference, and that's the way of life in college athletics, and that's why there's been, and particularly in football and in FBS, and that's why there's been so much conversation over the years about is there a right way to divide those within the FBS? Do we need to think about organizational structure, NCAA, differently when we think about football? All of those things. So I get his frustration, but I think it's reality that there is separation.
Mac, do you worry at all that there's going to be more separation now as people start to coin the term power two or things along those lines? Or do you feel like outside of the financials, things will pretty much remain the same Power Five wise?
Yeah, Craig, there's been that, been that conversation, right? Behind the scenes, underlying, that, hey, we're moving to two power conferences, right? And so now there's going to be maybe even three levels. I don't think there's any will for that to happen. I don't think there's will for that to happen with the TV media partners, and I think they have a big say in it. I really, really do. I think that we're going to have more than just two autonomy conferences. Where that ends up, and the only reason I say that is obviously because we have one of those conferences that is working through their TV media deal, and it remains to be seen what that's going to look like, and whether or not it's going to keep everybody together. So I don't think there's an appetite to go to just two conferences whatsoever.
Mac, over the last several weeks and even months, from Brett Yormark and the Big 12 mentioning the fourth time zone, and even some presidents and I think even ADs from Pac-12 programs have mentioned what they're going through, what they're expecting, what they hope occurs. But there have been some that have admitted that they have had conversations, I believe, with the Big 12 about whatever it might be. Has anybody from the Pac-12 conference been in touch with or met with anybody from the Big 12 in recent days?
I appreciate the question. It's one that I'm not going to address. I'm certainly not going to talk publicly. It's not my place to talk publicly about who the Big 12's meeting with and when. What I will say is conference membership continues to be a discussion, and one of the main discussion items for the Big 12, and what does that look like for the future. And I think there's two ways to look at it. There's certainly the immediate future and that impact, but it's also looking through the lens of when this new TV agreement that begins July 1, 2025 expires in 2031. How do we set ourselves up in the very, very best way for that next contract? And so again, it remains a topic of conversation for us. We're ready depending upon how certain things play out, and we'll go from there. I don't think that there's anybody that feels like we have to. So I think it's more about, hey, let's make sure that if we do, it's truly value added, whether it's value added, within the next 6 to 8 years, and or how it value adds for that next bite at the apple.
Mac, if you were an AD at a school right now, for example, the Pac-12, would you want to make sure before you made any decisions that you found out what in the heck you were working with in the first place?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, I think there's an alliance, an allegiance, a loyalty to the conference that you're in, and so I think you're going to want to run that ground ball out, knowing and understanding that there's repercussions for others in the conference. Maybe if you don't now. I say that in general. I'm not privy to the conversations in the Pac-12, and is there confidence in terms of there will be good news eventually? Does it continue to be delayed? And so those are all things that as an athletic director and as a president and as an institution, you've got to measure and be thinking about it. So, but I think in general, yeah, you're gonna have that allegiance and that loyalty and want to see it to the end, unless you lose confidence in what or lose confidence in the direction that organization is going.
I don't know if it was you, but I know I had somebody at Baylor, I can't remember, but it might have been you that mentioned that the Pac-12 has some that run the Pac-12, whether it's Kliavkoff or if it's presidents or ADs that have kind of had a little bit of a, hey, man, what is the Big 12 trying to do here? Like almost there's a campaign against one another. Did you ever have, when you were in Scottsdale, or have you had conversations with other Pac-12 ADs where they've kind of bit back a little bit and asked you that? And what has been your response if they have?
Yeah, I mean, I know, I have friendships with a lot of the Pac-12 ADs, and so if we've had conversation, they've always been cordial. I think they've always been respectful. They've never, asked, what are we doing? What are we trying to do? I think, there's a difference between conversations that you have privately versus conversations that are public.
Mm-hmm.
Those have always been respectful, always been positive.
I got one more. Oh, go ahead, Craig.
Yeah, completely off. Are you about realignment? Go ahead.
No, it's not. No, it's
okay. Off topic, Mac. I know there's a lot going on with spring sports, but just wanted to highlight softball in particular from this past weekend. I know some sports have now ended as of Saturday, Sunday, and whatnot, but it seems like a big weekend with that sweep over Texas for Glenn Moore and company.
Yeah, that was a big weekend in the sweep, and I was in Fort Worth for that time for my daughter's and son-in-law's wedding vow renewal, since they got married during COVID, so couldn't be there, but certainly watched it on ESPN Plus, and awesome to see, particularly that the game on Sunday and winning it in the bottom of the seventh, but because of that sweep, we've set ourselves up and at least given ourselves a chance, an opportunity to host. Obviously the top 16 teams will host, and I think we've got some work to do in the Big 12 tournament. We start that on Thursday against Iowa State, but probably need a little bit we've got a little bit of work to do there. And then because, again, of the sweep, we have an opportunity to potentially host. But really proud of Glenn Moore and this team. And, we have faced some injuries, and we've been able to overcome that and work through that. And, I think it's a group of young ladies that really are close and tied together and play for one another. And Coach Moore and the staff have done a terrific job. So happy for them, and I'm excited to see how they do in the Big 12 championship tournament.
I was asked to ask you this question, and I know you got to go. We always appreciate your access and time. These games that are being played perhaps at some point in Mexico, and I think Houston and I forgot, Paul, was it Kansas are going to have a basketball game there, not 2023, 24, or maybe they will. Is that when you go outside of so-called the boundaries of the United States, is there ever a conversation with student athletes about those trips and what they think of them, or is that just part of scheduling in college athletics today?
That's a really I appreciate that question because I assume that every institution does it differently. I think here at Baylor, if we have an opportunity to play, outside of the United States internationally, that's certainly going to be a conversation we have with our student athletes. And unfortunately, that leaked, like a lot seems to leak. When we have spring meetings, but there's a lot to still be talked about when we think about Mexico and certainly, the NFL has been very successful there. The NBA has been very, very successful there. But what does that look like? What does that look like for football? What does that look like for men's basketball? What does that look like for women's basketball? Additional sports. So still a lot of work to be done there. And I don't know that, we're going to do, football, exactly like we're going to do basketball. And what I mean by that, don't know that football has to be a regular season game. Could it be a postseason type opportunity? Basketball, how do we do that? Non-conference versus conference, all of those things. So a lot to still be discussed and embedded through. And we do think it's a great branding opportunity for the Big 12 and our TV media partners certainly support it, but much more to talk about.
Mack, I have a serious follow-up to a topic you brought up a second ago. Vow renewals. As somebody who gets married in 35 days, are those what you would call cost-effective, and do I need to start saving up now because I want to make sure that I'm ahead of the game here?
Those are probably not cost-effective.
Okay.
So they're certainly not stress-free effective.
Okay.
So we my daughter and my son-in-law, planned for a first wedding and all of the stresses that go with that, and then had to cancel it because of COVID. All of the stresses that went with that, and so that they did get married in front of about 25 people, and then we had to relive the stresses for a third time for the wedding vow renewal. But I will say this: it was worth every one of those stresses. It was an unbelievable time, and to see the joy that it brought my daughter Noelle and my son-in-law Mason on their faces to be able to celebrate that with family and friends was awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, that's good. Good advice, Paul. Did you listen to him?
Yes, I got it. I got it.
My advice, Paul, is to do it once.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mack.
Taken well. Yeah,
Mack Rhoades, thank you, Mack, Director of Athletics at Baylor, with us on most Tuesdays. Last week was the Big